So I'm sure you know, but just in case, Rachel Hollis is a self-help influencer / former relationship marriage advice giver who got canceled for posting this video on TikTok and then later on Instagram.
Okay, yesterday I was doing a live stream and I mentioned that there's a sweet woman who comes to my house twice a week and cleans. She's my house cleaner. She cleans the toilets. Someone commented and said, "You are privileged AF." And I was like, you're right. I'm super freaking privileged, but also I worked my ass off to have the money to have someone come twice a week and clean my toilets. And I told her that. And then she said, "Well, you're unrelatable." What is it about me that made you think I want to be relatable? No, sis, literally everything I do in my life is to live a life that most people can't relate to. Most people won't work this hard. Most people won't get up at 4 a.m. Most people won't fail publicly again and again just to reach the top of the mountain. Literally every woman I admire in history was unrelatable. If my life is relatable to most people, I'm doing it wrong.
So that video was posted in April of 2021. Now flash forward to today, Rachel Hollis has been trying to rebuild her career back from that moment where basically everyone, most people, not everybody, but most people turned their back on her, including some of her self-help friends and a lot of her community that she built up for years and years. She's spoken about the cancellation a tiny bit here and there, both on her own social media platform as well as on other people's podcasts. But this is the one that's the most recent and also the one that I think really dives into it the most that I've seen. So let's break the whole thing down. I thought the disclaimer at the top that the two hosts of the Skinny Confidential podcast gave were ironic and interesting.
So I just want to give you a disclaimer right ahead of time. This is not a safe space. This podcast has not been built to be a safe space. It was never meant to come out and make you only feel good. Safe spaces are places where you never feel challenged, where you don't have to stretch yourself, where you feel comfortable, right? This is not that podcast, and it never has been.
The Disney Channel may be a better outlet.
For those of you that are willing to kind of hear a different perspective, challenge yourself, not be so upset about not being in a safe space, this one's for you. And for those that need to be coddled and stay in a safe space, maybe turn it off.
I thought it was interesting that that was their take on what their podcast does. But meanwhile, throughout the podcast, they often touted some kind of safe space type of behavior that they wish that the world would follow.
As people with public platforms, there is a level of responsibility to think about, at least think about how you say things, which, I mean, same thing, Lauryn and I go through it all the time. But at the same time, I would push back, and we're all part of this, on the public and say there's also a responsibility to just be a good human, right? You can fuck up publicly or make mistakes, but I feel like that's the time when society should wrap their arms around people and say, okay, this is not okay. This is a fuck up. Let us help you get back up to a place where, you know, we can all move forward.
Oh yes, the very controversial non-Disney Channel concept of society wrapping their arms around someone going through a divorce. So at this point, I want to give Rachel a little bit of credit because she had several times throughout the podcast admitted some guilt. Not fully, not as much as I think she should have admitted to, and going into more specifics, she kept it very vague, but there were several times where she did admit that there was something wrong.
This is the definition of privilege, is that it never ever occurred to me how it would be taken. I take full responsibility, like 100%. I take full responsibility, because the bottom line is if people felt like I had created a space that wasn't welcoming to them, then I'm going against my core values as a person and as a creator. So I did something wrong and I had to learn from it.
However, many of those times came with a caveat or a but at the end of it.
So I did something wrong and I had to learn from it. But the issue with cancel culture is that I don't feel like most people care whether or not the person who made the mistake is actually learning or growing or evolving. They just want to see what they can do to sort of, how far can we take this? And that feels twisted.
And I hate to say this, but I think that Lauryn, the host, was a little bit sexist against Rachel Hollis, meaning that she used the mother card a lot to kind of excuse Rachel's behavior.
Do you also think that you were so distracted with everything that's going on? You've got kids, what you were going through with your husband, the book, the six, like it's like so
1,000,000%
much that like maybe you like weren't even along, you mentioned privilege, but you weren't even thinking.
And you're running a sizable company at this stage, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, we still had, like 30, maybe 40 people at that point.
How do you even show up for all those people and your kids? I don't even know how you had the capacity to have 4 children, a husband. Like, that is a lot.
Right.
The same way I don't think it's appropriate for people to ask women who are in positions of power how they can be a mom while they're so busy. It's also not okay to say, oh, well, you should be forgiven for all of your mistakes because you're a mom. It doesn't work both ways, in my humble opinion. Now, like I said, I gave Rachel credit for taking some responsibility and admitting that she was at fault, even a little bit. However, when she actually goes to describe her intentions of making that video in the first place, she added something that I've never heard her talk about before, and maybe this is the truth, but I just don't buy it personally.
I was doing a live stream. Let's say it was like a Tuesday. I was doing a live stream, and on the live stream, I had this woman who was saying that she was suffering from severe depression. And she was asking me, she had so much guilt and shame because her house was messy. And I was like, okay, a couple of things that you could do. Number one, you could just be okay with a messy house. Like, what matters most right now is your health. So you can focus on that, or if you can afford it, get a housekeeper. And during that live stream, I started to get so much flack for saying that, like, oh, you could get someone to come and clean your house once a month. And I got so much crap for saying that in the live stream. And then they started attacking me, which I'm very used to, but then they started being mean to her. And so that got me sort of, because I'm like, fuck you, dude. Like, this woman just told you that she has severe depression. She just said that she feels shame about it. Don't dogpile.
Okay, so a couple things there. Number one, the video that she made in no way talked about depression, in no way talked about the woman on the stream. And I just think it's sort of a deflection tactic to be like, I don't care about my feelings, I'm strong. But this poor woman in my live stream that was asking me a genuine question, that's who I was defending. The second thing is that she used the word dogpile, and I believe it was very intentional. Dogpiling is now a term that is used when someone is canceled and a bunch of people are attacking that person from the internet.
Well, I think what was wild was, like, it felt like dogpiling. It felt like people kicking you when you were at your lowest, when I was at one of my lowest points in my life. So it just was this dogpile of grossness.
I think Rachel Hollis wants to be associated with that word, that's what happened to her. She was canceled simply because the internet dogpiled on her, so therefore she's actually the true victim in this whole scenario. So the one thing that did piss a lot of people off that she does address is the caption, and I didn't even talk about that yet. That's a whole separate issue that Rachel Hollis had with this post. So her caption said, Harriet Tubman, RGB, Marie Curie, Oprah Winfrey, Amelia Earhart, Frida Kahlo, Malala Yousafzai, Wu Zichan, all unrelatable AF. Happy Women's History Month. So this is what she has to say about that.
When I wrote about it, I listed women historically who are unrelatable. Like, all of these women who had inspired me. I'm a huge history nerd. So I was just naming women who were my heroes, and I never, ever in my life, it never occurred to me that people would say, you're comparing yourself to Frida Kahlo. You're comparing yourself to Harriet Tubman. And again, that's my privilege that it never occurred to me that people would take it that way. But that was the hardest thing for me to wrap my brain around, because in my head, I was paying honor to women that I admire. It never occurred to me that people would say, you're saying that you worked as hard as fill in the blank historical figure. Literally everything I do in my life is to live a life that most people can't relate to. Literally every woman I admire in history was unrelatable.
I gotta say, I don't know how you are surprised that was misconstrued, if it was misconstrued at all. Even the verbiage that she chose to use, literally, I do my whole life, blah, blah, blah. Literally, all of the women in history are unrelatable, blah, blah, blah. You're making a real comparison there, and I think it's fair for people to think that you are at least striving to be as unrelatable as Harriet Tubman. I think that's a fair assumption. Okay, so the next part of the saga deals with the fallout and the aftermath.
It was the weekend, and I had at the time a PR team. I was working with a PR team because I was doing press. They had helped me after the launch of my last book. And I was like, hey, I don't really know, like, should I take this down? I don't know. I don't really understand, but should I take this down? And they were like, just don't do anything. Don't say anything. Don't comment. Don't do anything. We'll talk about it on Monday. And at this point, it's like, it's been picked up. It's an issue. And so I ended up writing something myself just because I felt like I have to say something about this. And then the internet, I don't remember what I wrote in that, to be totally honest with you. And then that was like, it's not enough. You didn't say I'm sorry in the right way. You didn't say it to the full extent.
So that apology was deleted, but of course, it's the internet. Everything lives forever. Let's talk about that apology now. And we are dealing with the classic Notes app apology, so we know it's gonna be a good one. So she said, someday I'll learn. Not yet apparently, but someday I'll learn. Someday I'll learn that my intent and my impact can be wildly different things. I made a post last week that was upsetting to people, and even though that was never my intent, I own that it was, and I apologize. Was my post upsetting because I said I have someone who cleans my house twice a week? No, and this is the biggest thing, and she still did not address this in this podcast at all. It's not because you had someone clean your house. It's that you said you have a sweet lady who comes and cleans your toilets. And she not only said that once, she said cleans my toilets twice.
She cleans the toilets. To have someone come twice a week and clean my toilets.
That's why people have a problem. Even though you may not have felt like that was a derogatory comment, the implication of someone cleaning toilets is not necessarily a positive one. I've talked a lot about this over the years. I have a nanny. I have someone who helps with cleaning. I have a team at work who helps to build this business, and I think it's crucial that I keep talking about it. I could very easily pretend that I don't have any assistants. Literally, no one is asking you to do that. I'm sure it would make my brand more likable and certainly more relatable if I act like I achieve all of these things through hard work and organization, but that's bullshit. You don't have to have a clean house or help with your kids or a business with 25 employees, but if you see those things in my life and wonder how they got there, I want you to know that it's a group effort, a whole village in fact. Was my post upsetting because I mentioned some of my favorite women in history? This one is even harder for me because those women are the most badass I could think of. Someone on my team said, I think people believe you're comparing yourself to them. Comparing myself to the first woman to win a Nobel Prize? The first and only female monarch in the history of China? To the most inspiring woman in American history who freed herself and then risked her life repeatedly to lead others out of slavery? There is no comparison. To believe that because I mentioned them, I am comparing myself to them is ludicrous. Do I aspire to be as brave, as fierce, to live life on my own terms and hopefully inspire other women to do the same? Hell yes. But I cannot now or ever compare myself to those women, and I don't want to. I don't want to try and be the next fill in the blank. I'd like to try and be the first me. That was where things started, but because I still haven't learned, I didn't respond to these things on Friday when I heard that people were upset. I listened to my team instead of my gut.
I was like, oh, I have apologized and I've said, and it was like, you didn't apologize enough, or you didn't apologize to all of us for all the reasons we were offended. And then that felt so overwhelming because I was like, fuck, I don't know what to do. And people are so upset. And I just in the middle of like a shitstorm.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and I will make an apology video. But it sounds like Rachel only really apologized for having someone clean her house, which no one I don't think has a problem with, and for other people misunderstanding where she was coming from. Yeah, that apology falls flat for many, many reasons. Her saying that she just has no earthly idea as to why people are mad or why her apology fell flat. Why would you do this?
I have never seen a single comment to that video. Not one.
It seems like the first place to look as to an explanation as to why people are upset. Read the comments.
I wrote another apology, and then I took the video down when I posted that one.
The second and final apology says, I'm not going to do this perfectly, but I'm going to speak from my heart. I'm so deeply sorry for the things I said in my recent posts and the hurt I have caused in the past few days. I know I've caused tremendous pain in mentioning prominent women, including several women of color, whose struggles and achievements I can't possibly understand. By talking about my own success, I diminish the struggles and hard work of many people who work tirelessly every day. I mean, that's better. Still not perfect. Okay, I'm done with apologies for the day. That's enough. That's my quota. So Michael, the host of the podcast, or the co-host of the podcast, asks Rachel and kind of sets up this question, saying that when he was an entrepreneur and found some success, he had issues with his ego, and that, it was hard for people to get through to him. And he asked if Rachel had experienced anything similar. And she basically says no, and says this is the real reason as to why she did the video in the way she did.
I never felt like, oh, I'm so cool, or like I'm such a badass, or any of it, because truthfully, that whole experience, 18 and 19, was very overwhelming for me. So overwhelming. I was angry.
Angry about?
I was angry about about the people who were making comments on the live stream, because I got this idea for this video from that experience. I was angry about that. And truthfully, I was angry about, there's a lot of therapy coming through, guys. I had held it all together. I had a company of 60 employees at the beginning of 2020, and we did conferences. And that's not something that can happen inside of a pandemic. So I had held it together. I worked so hard to make sure people were employed, that our vendors got paid, that we didn't relinquish on anything that we owed. I had gone through this divorce and was destroyed in the world for getting a divorce. I was working to take care of my kids, to pay off my ex-husband, to do all of this stuff. And I felt like I am keeping all of this afloat, and there's so much pressure, and it's only me. And in that moment, I was like, this is going to make me emotional. It's so stupid. But I was like, the one thing that I have is this sweet woman who has been with me forever, by the way, who comes to my house twice a week and helps me to clean. I have the kids. I'm by myself. And this is this one thing that I have. I've made sure that all of these employees have jobs and health insurance and 401ks. And we eventually would end up having to do layoffs because you just can't hold 60 employees when you can't do a conference.
This is going to probably sound insensitive, but boo-hoo. You signed up for this, Rachel. You have claimed, and you have a literal mogul tattoo written on your wrist to remind you that you are a powerful boss, babe. So the fact that you were doing exactly what you signed up for, you had achieved dreams beyond a lot of people's wildest imagination. The fact that now you think that's a worthwhile excuse as to why you can just say whatever you want and not get any recourse, I think is a little bit ridiculous. Like I said, she does acknowledge some of her responsibility, but this to me seemed like this is where she starts to backtrack and say, well, yes, I can see where I offended people, but look, I had a job. Look, I'm a mom. It's and a few other points I want to make. Number one, she talks about having to lay off some employees. And I'm sure a lot of companies can relate to that, especially in the event space. But a lot of companies that do conferences switch to hybrid or switch to virtual. So I don't think every single company that had held conferences is now decimated, because I know for a fact that's not true. So I think she's really leaning into, oh, well, COVID caused this, COVID caused this. I really think this personal snafu caused a lot of her employees to be let go. Secondly, the Hollis company got a PPP loan when this was all going down, according to documents, and it was almost $1 million. And that was when she had 60 employees. So financially, there's really no excuse. That money was supposed to be used to keep everyone employed. I know I probably seem heartless because, she was having an emotional breakdown moment and, very touching, whatever. But, she's talking about, well, the only thing I have is this woman who comes and cleans my house, and this is the one thing I have. I think it's an over-exaggeration if I had to guess that that was the only thing that this woman has in her life at that moment. Maybe it's true, but she's talked about having a really close group of friends. She talks about having her children and having, she just got divorced, but that's one part of her life. And to just say this woman was the only thing she had, I think is a stretch. And even if that was the case, why did you say twice about her cleaning your toilet? Is that the way you want this woman who means so much to you to be presented posted to the public. And one part she mentioned briefly there was about the divorce and how she had to pay Dave off. I thought that was an interesting little tidbit. So let's talk about Dave and his role in this whole thing now.
Going through a divorce is fucking brutal. I don't care. It's so awful and hard. But what was so unbelievable to me was I could not fathom how many women attacked me for like, how dare you? You said till death do us part. You made vows. Nobody was upset with him, but everybody was upset with me.
And Rachel has claimed this several times that, oh, people, especially women, got really mad at her because she got a divorce. In my opinion, that's not why people were mad. That's part of the reason, but the bigger reason is that she was selling relationship advice based on the success of her marriage. If you just come to this conference in which we'll teach you how to be a better couple and have better date nights and better makeout sessions, that's the part that people got pissed about. Everyone has secrets. Everyone has, things behind closed doors. I think we can all agree on that. But when you're selling your story, when you're selling your relationship as the reason why people should pay you money, I think it's well within people's rights to be upset when you get divorced.
But do you think that's also in part because you guys had, created a business where, you're giving relationship advice?
Yeah, but why aren't they mad at him?
Right.
No, I listen.
And if you listen to our relationship advice, if you listen to our podcast, we talked about problems all the time. Here's what we are struggling with. Here's this issue.
And again, Lauryn really just goes right to Rachel's defense. And like I've talked about before, I don't think Dave's a great guy, but just because Rachel says something doesn't necessarily mean that's the truth. And also she says she doesn't read the comments or go on social media to consume anything. So how would she know that nobody was mad at Dave? No one was mad at him. How would you know that? And I will say with the Hollises, both of them, not just Rachel, but Dave and Rachel both, they would say something negative or could be perceived as a negative about each other, but then immediately follow it up with, but it's also the best, but also it helps me grow.
This has been I would argue, best year of our marriage and the hardest year of our marriage.
Absolutely. Because we had very publicly said for 5 years we had been working on something that ultimately would be the thing that destroyed us.
Don't be alarmed, I have switched microphones. So what is she saying here? I feel like this is a big moment in this whole saga because Rachel's been kind of insinuating that there's this big, dark secret that Dave's been living this double life behind her back, and that's what really caused the divorce to happen. But now she's saying, oh, we've publicly talked about what was the demise in the making. And the only thing that I know that they've talked about that, Dave was in trouble for was his drinking, which he has since taken care of. So at least that's what he says. And that he was not interested in personal development as much as Rachel would have liked him to be. So he wasn't like gung-ho about going to a Tony Robbins conference, at least at first. So I'm kind of confused here as to what she's talking about. So maybe this big, deep, dark secret was actually not that deep and dark, and she's just trying to make it seem bigger and more sinister than it is. I'm confused now.
And the crazy thing was nobody knew the truth, and still people don't know the truth. And they don't know the truth because I want to protect my children. And so
from my experience, meaning like you would think that because so many women have experienced, men and women have experienced divorce,
right,
that it would be a time when women would want to support you, right? But it was almost the opposite.
I also don't think that anyone's owed the truth. The truth is your truth.
Right.
Okay, so now we've backtracked, and now there is a big secret that she's not going to reveal because she's protecting the children. So I'm back to being confused. I think she's confused in her messaging. And the second part of this is Lauryn saying, well, no one's owed the truth. Okay, yes, in most 99.9% of marriages, I don't think anyone but the two people in the marriage, or how many people are in the marriage, deserve to know, the details. However, when you have turned this into a business, when you have sold people within months or a year, thousands of dollars worth of materials into how to make their relationship better, and they were basing that on how successful your marriage was, I think they are in need of a little bit of clarification, because is all the advice null and void now? Should they stop doing that? And obviously there's a racial component to this, because not only does she compare herself to Frida Kahlo and Harriet Tubman, she also used the term cis this in a somewhat derogatory way, and some people argued that that was misappropriating Black culture. So in an effort to fix these wrongs, she did this.
So the irony is that my best friend, her job is literally teaching white people how to not be assholes. She was the first person that I asked, okay, I'm a fucking idiot. Okay, what do I need to read or read again? So I got a list of books from her that I worked my way through.
But she makes sure to tell you that.
And that was the last that I asked other people, because one of the things I was very conscious of, this is a thing that especially white women do a lot, is ask Black women how they can be doing better. So they're like, tell me what I should read. Tell me. It's like, fuck you. Google it. Because you're making them.
You're putting the burden on them.
You're putting the burden on them. Like your education. And I only ask because I am in relationship with this person and she is so close to me.
Rachel Hollis's message here is do as I say, not as I do. As we're reaching the end of this video, I think this probably is the weirdest thing that she said the whole time. I have no idea what she means by this, unless she is totally unhinged and has no idea about what's going on in the world. She literally says this.
You know who my dream is? You know who I want to be? Jon Favreau. Do you know who Jon Favreau is?
Of course.
Fucking killing it.
Like, the director, right?
Actor, producer,
stuff,
writing, like behind the scenes. Like Jon Favreau started as an actor. He was in a movie called Swingers in like the early 2000s. Classic, so good. And he wrote that and then starred in it. And so he had a little bit of fame. And so he was an actor in different things and then ended up either writing or directing Iron Man.
That, and also he's just did The Mandalorian.
Oh, yeah, he's done it since then. He just keeps, he's not going, he doesn't have social, or if he does, he's not doing anything. He doesn't have fame. He does, like, if you saw him, you'd be like, holy shit, that's Jon Favreau. But he's just quietly making really cool shit, directing Lion King, killing it. And that's a dream. Like I used to, when I was younger, I thought I wanted fame. I thought I wanted to be recognized in the airport, and I just want to be able to make some stuff and do it with people who are cool and go home and make dinner for my kids.
What I think she's not grasping here is that Jon Favreau, which he does have social media, he has a lot of followers, he doesn't go around teaching people how to be directors. He doesn't have a course on how to become the most enlightened director ever in the world, and you can be like me for $50,000. He literally is doing what he wants to do and not talking about it, not teaching about it, not showing, oh, how amazing I am. Maybe that's what you need. It's not what she's been doing, though. That's not what Rachel Hollis is all about. She is about teaching people how to be like her. All of her stories, all of her content, everything that she does up until this point has been about her. Even her fictional books were based loosely on stories that she had experienced in her own life. So Jon Favreau is not making, autobiographical documentaries every day. He's making content unrelated to who he is as a person. If that's what you want, you can literally do that in any other creative job. At the end of the podcast, Lauryn asks her what new projects are coming up, and Rachel just says, oh, something different. You'll have to, see and find out. We can assume based on Rachel's own Rach talks that this is probably some sort of musical ambition. She says she is learning to sing, write songs, and she's interested in meeting with a choir director. Who the heck knows? I don't know. I'm sure I'll talk about it if and when it happens, but good luck. Oh, brother. Thank you for watching this video. Choose Sadness merch is available right now. The link is in the description below. You can get something like this. It's very comfortable. I've worn this all day. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Comment if you've listened to the whole podcast. I think it's worth a listen. And thank you, as always, to my patrons on Patreon. I appreciate your support always. And I will see you in the next video. Choose Sadness.